great to be back here in sunny Palm Springs. When I was here last month to talk about heroic women in opera who don't die, we almost died of a windstorm here, but I think the breeze is gentle this afternoon and we should be able to survive without getting blown over. By the way, I always get asked, what's a dramaturg? And my quick answer is it's a fancy term for scholar in residence. And most of my career at San Francisco Opera was in hardcore bureaucratic administration, or schedules and budgets and chorus and orchestra and dancers and all that. But my background is in musicology or music history, and so I started doing stuff like this. And so that when I went to part-time, they called me Dramaturg, and now I'm Emeritus. So it's sort of kicked upstairs, I guess you could say. So yeah, we're going to have some fun this afternoon with Operetta. I love the graphics that Palm Springs Opera Guild created for my series of talks. This is the third year I've done 3 talks over the overall, under the overall rubric of Who's Afraid of Opera? And today it's Betting on Operetta, Spotlight on Light Opera. So we're going to talk about fun stuff today in the operetta realm. And just as a reminder, as Jeffrey mentioned, tomorrow night, a program right here at 7 called The Silver Age of Operetta, From the Old World to the New, and you'll understand the significance of that this afternoon as I talk about how European traditions found their way to America in the field of operetta. We have 2 very talented singers tomorrow night, Anastasia Maliaras and J.J. Lopez, with Zach DeChance at the piano. So good stuff tomorrow night. That'll be more of the same in terms of repertoire as today's offerings, but live in person. So there's nothing better than live music. All right, so what's operetta? Some people are often a little unclear on the concept, and certainly Lucy Van Pelt in the Peanuts comic strip is. I'll let you read this for yourselves. So yeah, that she's not clear on what operetta's all about, is she? All right, so what really is operetta? The official dictionary of kind of the go-to work in English for opera is the Grove Dictionary of Opera. And it defines operetta as a light opera with spoken dialogue, songs and dances, emphasizing music rich in melody. The form flourished during the second half of the 19th century and the first half of the 20th century, and evolved into and was largely superseded by the musical. And that dividing line between operetta and musical is very blurry, and we'll explore a little bit of that this afternoon as well. So there are various national styles of operetta that we're going to look at this afternoon. And we start with the French. They were the first really to get into this kind of operetta, comic opera, light opera with lots of spoken dialogue, and they tend to be oh so French, a little naughty and very satirical. And almost all operettas, as I've mentioned in my definition, have quite a bit of dancing, and there's almost always a happy ending. Sometimes there's a little bittersweet, but there's never any tragedy. There are no suicides or people going to the guillotine or anything like that. The English tend to be witty and a bit silly, very topical in their humor. The Viennese, which we're going to spend a lot of time on this afternoon, are schmaltzy, waltzy, and romantic. And the European tradition coming to America turns into something that is typically American, tuneful and a little bit brash. So we'll get all of that to explore today. Starting with the French, and the practitioner of French operetta that we should know about is Jacques Offenbach. He was German by birth, born in Cologne to a Jewish family, and he studied in Paris and remained there. He found his Jewish background was a little more welcome in France than it was back home in Germany. True story, because he was from Cologne and because his last name began with the letter O, he sometimes jokingly signed his name O de Cologne. I'm not making that up. He was a famed cello virtuoso, but he's best known for 100 operettas, including Orpheus in the Underworld, which is a spoof, of course, about Greek mythology. La Belle Hélène, which is also a spoof. It's about Helen of Troy. The Grand Duchess of Gerolstein, which some people thought might have been a spoof on Maria Theresa or Catherine the Great, or one of those empresses. And then there's La Pericole, and La Vie Parisienne, the Parisian life, and The Voyage to the Moon. We're going to play a little bit of typical operetta music. If there's anything that says French operetta, it's this, the can-can from the overture to Orpheus in the Underworld. I'm sure you're imagining ladies with big ruffled skirts and legs in the air. And yeah, that's what happens in a can-can. Here is a scene from Orpheus in the Underworld. I played a little bit of this as the Fly duet. In my first series of lectures, which was in 2019, I believe, I did a thing about comic operas called Opera for Laughs, and I played a little bit of this scene. I won't play the whole thing for you, but this is a spoof, as I mentioned, about Orpheus in Eurydice. You know the story. He goes to hell and sings so beautifully he persuades the gods to let her spirit go, and then he turns around to look at her, and it goes bad from there. Anyway, this is the spoof on that. So Pluto has hidden Eurydice in a secret room in the underworld, but Jupiter, who wants her for himself, slips through the keyhole by turning into a beautiful, shiny fly. And if you know your Greek and Roman mythology, Jupiter's always turning himself into something, into a bull or a shower of gold or a swan, whatever. Here, he's a fly.
Ma chanson, la touche, chantons ma chanson.
Ah, la belle mouche, le joli fredon. Bella, c'est quel est le ton rire? Veux-tu rester mon compagnon? Ces lieux dont tu forces à montrer, hélas, me servent de prison. Ne me quitte pas, je t'en prie, reste pour prendre bien soin de toi. Je t'aimerai, mouche jolie, reste avec moi, je t'aimerai, mouche jolie.
And so on. It gets quite racy in this staging, but I'll let you use your imagination about where it goes from here. Here is a little more Offenbach. This is the tipsy aria from La Pericole, and this really needs no explanation at all. This is a typical set of couplets, as the French say, couplets, or that is to say two verses with the exact same music but different words. And that's all you need to know. The wonderful Anne-Sophie von Otter in the tipsy aria from Offenbach's La Pericole.
Quel dîner je viens de faire, et quel vin extraordinaire. J'en ai tant bu, mais tant, que je crois bien que maintenant je suis un peu grise. Monsieur, faut pas qu'on me dise. Faut pas. Faut pas.
Second verse.
Si ma parole est un peu vague, et si on marche je zigzague, et si mon œil est grillard, il ne faut s'en étonner, car je suis grise, machin. Faut pas qu'on me dise. Faut pas. Faut vache.
Must have been really good wine. All right, that's the French. Now, the English are, of course, personified in operetta by Gilbert and Sullivan, that is W.S. Gilbert, the librettist, and Sir Arthur Sullivan. He got knighted, but Gilbert did not, because Queen Victoria thought he was a little irreverent in his texts. Lots of wonderful satire and fun, sometimes a little bit of silliness. Here is the Pirate King's aria from the Pirates of Penzance, for example.
For I am a pirate king, and it is a glorious thing to be a pirate king. For I am a pirate king, and it is a glorious thing to be a pirate king.
And one thing that's peculiar to a British operetta, particularly Gilbert and Sullivan, is the patter song, a song that sort of crams as many words as possible into the shortest period of time. You only find this in English operetta for some reason. Here's the modern Major General in the Pirates of Penzance.
I am the very model of a modern major general. I've information, vegetable, animal, and mineral. I know the kings of England, and I call the fight historical, from Marathon to Waterloo in order categorical. I'm very well acquainted with matters mathematical. I understand equations, both the simple and quadratical. About binomial theorem, I'm teeming with a lot of news, with many cheerful facts about the square of the hypotenuse. I'm very good at integral and differential calculus. I know the scientific names of beings animalculous. In short, in matters vegetable, animal, and mineral, I am the very model of a modern major general.
The closest thing in opera to this kind of patter is actually in Rossini, in operas like The Barber of Seville or Cinderella, various others, where you have singers singing as fast as possible with as many syllables as possible. Somehow gets carried over into English operetta. But Gilbert and Sullivan can be poignant as well. And here's a tenor aria that carries that forward from HMS Pinafore, which is a satire about the Navy, of course. And young Ralph Rackstraw is a common sailor on the ship, but he is in love with the captain's daughter, and he knows it's hopeless because she's high-born, and he's just a low-born common sailor, so it'll never happen. At least he thinks so. Here is a little bit of his aria, A Maiden Fair to See.
Unlearned he in aught save that which love has taught, for love had been his tutor. Oh, pity, pity me, our captain's daughter she, and I, that lowly suitor.
So in Gilbert and Sullivan, you get a little silliness, you get a little patter, and you get a little pathos. And happy ending, of course. All right, let's get to Viennese operetta, which is sort of the core of the repertoire in many ways. And we'll start with the most famous of the Viennese operetta composers, Johann Strauss Jr., the Waltz King, who composed over 500 waltzes and polkas and quadrilles and other dances. And you know his famous waltzes, the Blue Danube especially, da-da-da-dum, yum-bum, bum, bum, and so forth. If you saw 2001 Space Odyssey, you heard that a lot. Tales of the Vienna Woods and Voices of Spring are just a few of the many, many waltzes that he was famous for. He wrote 18 operettas, including Die Fledermaus, which means the bat, A Night in Venice, and the Gypsy Bear, and Die Fledermaus is by far the most popular of them, and is, I would have to say, of the Viennese operettas in general, the most frequently performed. It has a very famous overture with many different sort of themes from the opera itself. It's like a Broadway overture, kind of a potpourri of tunes from the upcoming show. And there's this famous waltz, which has this extremely Viennese technique that it's only Viennese orchestras seem to be able to pull this off really well. And it's the idea of slightly delayed third beat of the bar. You'll see what I mean. Daniel Barenbein, really superfluous there. He doesn't need to conduct this. I think the Vienna Philharmonic could play this blindfolded in their sleep. That's the famous Musikverein in Vienna, a wonderful hall there that I'm sure some of you have been. This is one of their famous New Year's Eve concerts, just this past year, or this current year rather. All right, so I'm going to play you a trio from Die Fledermaus. It's kind of fun and sums up the sort of frivolity that is typical of this opera, or operetta. So tonight, Eisenstein is supposed to begin his 8-day jail sentence for striking a policeman. His friend Falca persuades him to delay the sentence until morning so that the two men could go to the lavish ball at Prince Orlovsky's, where there'll be lots of pretty girls. Meanwhile, Falca's plotting revenge, which has to do with the bat, but we don't have to get into that. He tells Eisenstein's wife, Rosalinda, that if she comes to the ball in disguise, she'll be able to observe her husband flirting with other women. Her maid Adele also plans to go in disguise to Orlovsky's ball, secretly borrowing one of her mistress's dresses. And in their trio, Rosalinda joins Adele in a falsely bittersweet farewell as her husband supposedly heads off to prison, quote unquote. All three can barely conceal their glee at the delights ahead amidst their pretended grief. So here is this trio from the Met. In my comic opera lecture 3 years ago, I used something from English National Opera, but this is from the Met, also sung in English, though. It's Oh No, That Moves Me So. This is the trio from the first act of Die Fledermaus.
Although we are forced to part, please don't be broken-hearted. Although I have to go, I'll see you in a week.
Oh no, that moves me so.
That moves me so, oh God, oh what a tale, oh no, that moves me so, oh God, I've got to go, oh no, that moves me so, oh God, what a tale, oh no, that moves me so, oh God, I've got to go, I have to go, I have to go.
Wonderful production there. There's evocation of Klimt in the paintings in the background. All right. Because Strauss is so famous, I'm not going to spend any more time on him. Let's go on to other Viennese operetta composers that deserve some attention, including Franz Lehár, who is Hungarian, as several of the composers we're going to look at today were. His best-known operettas are The Merry Widow, The Land of Smiles, and Giuditta. And if you look at his dates there, he was active all during the Nazi period and had rather a complicated relationship with the Nazis. He often used Jewish librettists for his operettas, and his wife was Jewish, but she had converted to Catholicism, and therefore she survived attempts to deport her. And Lehar attempted to intervene to protect Jewish singers, which was a dangerous thing for him to do, singers that he had worked with, but he wasn't successful with that. He did receive awards from Hitler, who enjoyed his music, so, kind of an awkward position to be in there for him. Here is a dance from The Merry Widow, which I think is very typical of the kind of dancing you expect in operetta. The plot basically involves a wealthy widow, as you might expect. She is from this mythical Eastern European country called Pontevedra, which I think we have to assume is Hungary, because the music tells us that that's the case. And in the second act, she is throwing a garden party at the Pontevedrian embassy in Paris. And this is the perfect set for it, really, wouldn't you think, as a sort of Hungarian garden party would look something like this. And here is some of the dancing that starts out very lively, and then it gets into one of those sort of melancholy, heart-throbbing, Hungarian-sounding central parts. Here we go. As we'll see as we look at Viennese operetta, it's very much imbued with Hungarian influences. Hungary, of course, was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire until that all fell apart after World War I. But the influences remained, in musically speaking, after that. At the same garden party, the Hanna Glavari is her name, the Merry Widow, sings a sort of a, I guess, Pontevedrian folk song about Vilja, who is a forest nymph, a mythical creature of the forest whom a young man falls in love with. So here's a little bit of the famous aria, Vilja, from the Merry Widow. Little bit of Vilja. And I've got more Merry Widow for you. It's quite a fun show. This is Rod Gilfrey as Danilo, who I've worked with Rod. He's a really great guy. I think he must have studied in Germany because his German, as you'll see here in this dialogue, is really pretty good. Here is the intro to men's ensemble that in English we call women, women, women. In German it's Weib, Weib, Weib. Here's a little bit of the dialogue leading up to this.
Negos Bruderherz, was hältst du eigentlich vom weiblichen Geschlecht?
Naja, von einem Geschlecht, das schwer zu halten ist. Ist schwer was zu halten.
Also, was macht man, wenn eine Ehefrau den Ehestand ein bisschen durcheinander bringt?
Naja, darüber muss ich, Gott sei Dank, nicht nachdenken.
And they launch into a tribute to women and how hard it is to understand them. Here's a little bit of the ending.
Ja, das Studium der Weiber ist schwer. Die Weiber, diese Weiber, verteufelt noch mehr. Die Weiber, diese Weiber, an sie und Leid. Das Weib, 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 Weib. Mädchen zart, Mädchen hat blondes Haar. Die Weiber, diese Weiber, ist im blauen Gewand. Die Weiber, diese Weiber, der Rot von einem Lohn sind gewöhnt, sich egal, was
Okay, women, women, women. All right, let's go on to another Franz Lehar piece, much less known, Das Land des Lächelns, The Land of Smiles. The only thing of it that is well known is this aria called Deines mein ganzes Herz, Yours is my whole heart. The plot involves a European woman who marries a Chinese guy and moves to China to live with him, but she hadn't counted on the idea of Chinese men having more than one wife. So it has a kind of a bitter ending, a bittersweet ending as she returns home to Europe. The famous aria here is sung by the guy who created the role, Richard Tauber, and he's singing it in English.
You are my heart's delight, and where you are, I long to be. You make my darkness bright, when like a star you shine on me. Shine, then my whole night your light divine bids me hope anew that dreams of mine may perhaps come true, and I shall hear your whisper, I love you.
Little trip down history lane there for the guy who created this role. We'll hear it sung live on this stage tomorrow night by J.J. Lopez, and I think the fidelity will be a lot better. All right, let's move on now to another Hungarian, Emmerich, Kallman. I was telling Jay Bartush earlier before the show that when I was working at San Francisco Opera in the 80s and 90s, Emeritus Kallman's daughter used to call me every year or so and say, why aren't you doing any of my father's operettas? And I had to plead, well, I'm really not involved in repertoire choices. You know, my job is to get the show on the stage once the piece has been chosen. He wrote more than 20 Viennese-style operettas, and the best known are the Csárdás Princess, that's the gypsy princess, we would say, and Countess Maritza. And like so many composers in this period, he fled to Paris after the Nazi Anschluss and then to New York, became a United States citizen, and this was after Hungary aligned with Hitler in that period, and then he settled in Paris after the war and died there. And as you can see when you hear his music, the Viennese waltz style has Hungarian seasoning in it, a little paprika. Here is a really delightful duet from Countess Maritza. And again, you don't really need to know anything about the plot situation. It's a little complicated, and I won't get into it. But this is a love duet. He's saying, Sag ja, say yes.
Mein lieber Schatz, zieh an dein schönstes Kleid, so gehen ziehen, mein Liebchen, sei bereit. Ich warte auf dich im Dunkeln vor dem Tor. Heut hab ich mit dir was Besonderes vor.
Die Stunde ist da, sie kommt mit leisem Schritt und bringt ein ganzes Herz voll Liebe mit.
Nun frag nicht, mein Liebchen, wohin Mach deine Augen nur fest zu und komm mit mir. Sag ja, mein Lieb, sag ja, solang das Glück dir noch nah. O fehlt mich mein Angesicht, ich trat dich weit in die Welt, ich trag mit starker Hand dich fort ins Märchenland. Sag ja, die Stunde des Glücks ist da. Mein Lieb, sag ja, sag ja.
Spoiler alert, she says yes. All right, American operetta now. We're going to shift across the ocean because so many of these people working in the former Austro-Hungarian Empire fled during the Nazi period. Victor Herbert doesn't count quite in that group, but he is a European transplant to America. He was born on the British Channel island of Guernsey, but raised in Kent, England, and then got his musical training in Stuttgart after his mother remarried to a German. So he had this English-German background and then becomes American. He moved to New York at age 26 to be a principal cellist at the Met. He became music director of the Pittsburgh Symphony in 1898. He wrote 43 operettas, including Babes in Toyland, Naughty Marietta, and 2 operas, Natoma and Madeleine. I've looked at Natoma, and I have to say it shows musical talent, but just a terrible libretto. Ugh. He deserved better as far as a librettist is concerned. Anyway, we're going to take a look at Naughty Marietta, which is a fun show. And it shows the Americanization, I think, of a European-trained composer. So desperate to avoid an arranged marriage, this French Princess Marie trades identities with her maid Marietta and sets sail from France to New Orleans, which of course is a French possession at this time. She's rescued from pirates by Captain Warrington, but to avoid romance, she remains cool to him. At a ball, she learns that Warrington is being sent away. Marietta sings, "Ah, sweet mystery of life." Warrington joins her in singing, and the lovers then flee into the wild frontier of Louisiana. Now, fun fact, the world premiere of Naughty Marietta in 1910 was conducted by, does anybody know? Gaetano Merola, the founder of San Francisco Opera. One of the fun facts that I uncovered. We were preparing for the centennial celebration in 22-23 in that season of San Francisco Opera, which was founded in the summer of 1922 by Gaetano Merola, who corralled a bunch of Italians in North Beach in San Francisco and got them to bankroll him to present 4 operas at the Stanford Stadium, which was brand new in 1922. He had gone to a football game there and noticed how good the acoustics were when he heard the band playing. He thought, this is a great place to do opera. Of course, he lost his shirt in that effort, but then he persuaded people to keep going. And the next year, then, 23, they got San Francisco Opera started in the city in what we now call the Bill Graham Civic Auditorium. Anyway, back to Naughty Marietta. I'm going to play you various little clips from this. This is from a film with Nelson Eddy and Jeanette MacDonald, that famous pair. So, the March of the Woodsmen, Farmers, and Native Americans, led by Captain Dick Warrington, yay, on their way to capture the pirates preying on inbound ships. Tramp, tramp, tramp. If you've ever played charades, it used to be a kind of a little private joke. If someone is new to charades and they've never played it before, you give them tramp, 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 and everybody pretends not to get it. And so the guy's, he's stomping around, and you're saying, walk, stride, and you never get to tramp, tramp, tramp. Anyway, here is the chorus.
Tramp, tramp, tramp along the highway. Tramp, 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 the road is free. Blazing trails along the byway.
now clear the roadway. Roam, 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 the world is free. We're planters and Canucks, Virginians and Kentucks, Captain Dick's on infantry, Captain Dick's on infantry. Tramp, clear the roadway. Roam, 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 the world is free. We're planters and Canucks, Virginians and Kentucks, Captain Dick's on infantry, Captain Dick's on infantry.
Now, this is the British composer trained in Germany, but it sounds American to me, don't you think? It's hard to define. Here is a little bit of the Italian street song. Marietta, that she's pretending to be Marietta, the maid. She's trying to ward off Captain Warrington's attentions, and a group of gypsies stroll by, advertising their marionette theater, and Warrington joins in as the gypsy girl sings the Italian street song. And she's stung by his remark that she might not be able to sing as well as he does, and as the gypsy does, rather. So Marietta joins in too. Here is just a little bit of the ending of the Italian street song.
Sing, 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 so May. Sing, 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 Landolin is gay. Sing, 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 boom, boom.
And of course, what you've all been waiting for, the duet, Ah, Sweet Mystery of Life. I won't play the whole thing. She sings the whole thing, then he sings the whole thing, and then they both sing the whole thing together. Let's start in the part where he sings it. Nelson Eddy, really a very fine singer, I think. This, of course, a movie was made long after Victor Herbert, rather, had died, but true to his musical style. So here's the second two-thirds of Ah, Sweet Mystery of Life. Remember, this is taking place in 18th century New Orleans, supposedly, before it became part of America.
Ah, sweet mystery of life, at last I found thee. Oh, I know at last the secret of it all. Love alone the world is seeking. And 'tis love and love alone I've waited for. And my heart has heard the answer to its calling.
Got to give them both a high note. Why not? All right, let's go on to Sigmund Romberg. Born in Hungary, again, another Hungarian, to a Jewish family, came to New York in 1909. Things were not so great for Jews in that area of the world long before Hitler came along. He was 22 at the time. Worked as a pianist in cafes and then began to write Broadway shows, best known for his operettas The Student Prince, The Desert Song, and The New Moon. So once again, it's a European trained musician, but really adopted American tastes and styles in his operettas. Here's the famous drinking song from The Student Prince. The actor we're seeing on the stage is Edmund Purdom, but the voice we're hearing is Mario Lanza.
Drink, 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 blue eyes that are bright as stars when they're shining on me.
Drink, drink, drink,
Your lips
that are red and sweet as the fruit on the tree. Here's a hope that those bright eyes will shine, lovingly, longingly, soon into mine. May those lips that are red and sweet tonight with joy my own lips meet. Drink, drink, let the toast start. May young hearts never part. Drink, 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 let every true lover salute his sweetheart.
Drink, 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 blue arms that are wide and warm as the rose in the sun. Drink, 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 two hearts that will love one only when I am the one.
Here's a hope that those soft arms will twine. All I ask is the right to see those smiling eyes beguiling me. Drink, drink, let the toast start. May young hearts never part.
Drink, drink,
Let every true lover salute his sweetheart. Let's drink.
We can find various areas of political incorrectness in operetta, and of course, binge drinking, I suppose, is one of them. Here is another bit of The Student Prince. Once again, Edmund Purdom on the screen, but the voice of Mario Lanza. This is the Serenade.
Overhead the moon is beaming, white as blossoms on the bough. Nothing is heard but the song of a bird, filling all the air with dreaming. Could I hear this song forever, calling to my heart anew? My darling, while I drift along forever, lost in a dream of you.
So the sort of sentimentality and romanticism that was typical of the Viennese style of operetta, we see cropping up with sort of American clothes on in these pieces by Romberg. Here's another sentimental duet from The Desert Song, Gordon MacRae and Katherine Grayson.
My desert is waiting, dear, come there with me. I'm longing to teach you love's sweet melody. I'll sing a dream song to you, painting a picture for two. Blue heaven and you and I, and sand kissing a moonlit sky, the desert breeze whispering a lullaby, only stars above you to see. I love the desert song calling its voice enthralling will make you mine.
And then it goes into duet from there, but I want to move on now to Rudolf Frimmel, yet another Eastern European, born in Prague, in Bohemia, what we now call the Czech Republic. Studied with Antonín Dvořák, moved to America in 1906, at age 27, worked at the Met as rehearsal pianist. He wrote more than 20 operettas, including The Firefly, Rosemarie, The Vagabond King, and The Three Musketeers. Here is a little bit of the famous Indian love call from Rosemarie. Once again, the team of Nelson Eddy and Jeanette MacDonald.
But if when you hear my love call ringing clear,
And I hear your answering echo so dear, then I will know
The person who put this on YouTube had to put their little crawl in there. Nelson Eddy and Jeanette MacDonald had legitimate opera careers in actual opera houses, but they're, of course, best known for their film work. Here's a little bit of the real Rudolf Frimmel himself playing on The Ed Sullivan Show, playing a little bit of the Indian love call in 1951. So many of these Eastern European talented composers who came to America and brought their style with them. You're all too young to remember the Ed Sullivan Show, but I have fond memories of it myself. Here's a little bit of the Song of the Vagabonds from The Vagabond King. You don't need to know too much about it, but they're Frenchmen against Burgundians. That's enough. Here's Mario Lanza singing it.
You and I are good for nothing but to die. We can die for liberty. Sons of toil and danger, will you serve a stranger and bow down to Burgundy? Sons of shame and sorrow, will you cheer tomorrow for the crown of Burgundy? Onward, onward, swords against the foe. Forward, forward, the lily banners go. Sons of France around us break the chain that bound us, and to hell with Burgundy. Sons of toil and danger, will you serve a stranger and bow down to Burgundy? Sons of shame and sorrow, will you cheer tomorrow for the crown of Sons of France around us break the chain that bound us, and to hell with Burgundy!
Mario Lanza. Okay, we've got two more composers really quick. We're almost done. Erich Korngold, Austrian of Jewish descent. His opera, Die Tote Stadt, The Dead City, it's an opera, not an operetta, premiered in 1920 when he was only 23 years old. He fled the Third Reich, like so many, moved to Hollywood in 1934, and he scored 16 films, won Oscars for Anthony Adverse and The Adventures of Robin Hood. And he's considered one of the founders of American film music. Later on, people who listen to his classical music would often say, oh, it sounds so much like Hollywood. But they have it backwards. It's not that Korngold sounds like Hollywood. Hollywood sounds like Korngold because he's the one who created that style of music film scoring. Here is a little bit of the rather bittersweet song of Piero, the Commedia dell'arte character in Die Todesstadt. As I mentioned, this is an opera, but it has certain operetta qualities. This is called Piero's Tanzlied, or Piero's dance song. And one more, Kurt Weill, from the early 1900s, born in Germany, grew up in the Jewish quarter there, studied with Engelbert Humperdinck, not the lounge singer from the 1970s, but the composer of the 19th century who wrote Hansel and Gretel. He later studied with Busoni and Hindemith and collaborated with theater director Bertolt Brecht in a lot of groundbreaking new sort of political theater, like Threepenny Opera, Die Drei Groschen Oper, 1928, married the actress Lotte Lenya, and fled Nazi Germany in 1933, like so many of the others, first to Paris, then to New York. And he studied American popular idioms and really adopted American styles in Broadway musicals like Knickerbocker Holiday and Lady in the Dark from 1941, which is during the war years. Lyrics by Ira Gershwin, directed by Moss Hart. So let's see if we can detect a crossover here now from operetta to Broadway, or are we somewhere in the middle, or is it a fusion of the two? Here's Gertrude Lawrence singing My Ship. Big band style.
My ship has sailed, ever made of silk. The decks are trimmed with gold, and of jam and spice there's a paradise in the hold. My ship's aglow with a million pearls and rubies fill each bin. The sun sits high in the sapphire sky when my ship comes in.
So, are we in Broadway land now? Are we still sort of hanging around in the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Viennese operetta style? Somewhere in the mixture there. It's, orchestration-wise, I would say we're definitely in America. But as the dictionary definition said, operetta sort of evolved into and was sort of submerged or taken over by the Broadway musical somewhere along the line. All right, that's it. I hope you'll all come around tomorrow night for the Silver Age of Operetta, and we'll be hearing music of Gilbert and Sullivan, Johann Strauss Jr., Jaromir Weinberger, another one of those Eastern European Jews who came to the United States, Jacques Offenbach, and Franz Lehar, and Leonard Bernstein. So we got all the bases covered: English, French, Viennese, and American. So I hope to see you then. If you want more information, I can recommend these two books, Operetta Theatrical History by Richard Traubner and The Operetta Empire by Michaela Baranello. Thanks for being here. It was a great pleasure. I hope you come tomorrow night.